Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. I am joined by Lutz slash Lutz, depending on when you're hearing about his last name, whether it's in modern day today or in the past. I'll just give the context. We started recording. I said his last name, nailed it, but then he gave me context about how there's different ways to pronounce it. And now we're diving into this. I just want to know, how are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great. The weather's nice. Am excited to be on this podcast. So, yeah, going well. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. It took us a while for me to let you into the Zoom room because I was picking a new Zoom background. Right
Hmm.
now, this looks like New York to me as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not actually there. I'm in Edmonton. But it's got the nice skyscrapers. I thought it was classy. It kind of hides my messy kitchen. But I'm going to dive into the context of this conversation because I get to be the honorary first podcast that you get to be on. And so I kind of set the standard for your podcast experience until somebody just completely blows out of the water. But with that said, there's a lot of things that inspire me about you and a lot of things that stood out. First and foremost, being your weight loss journey that you've undertaken, where at one point you were 381 pounds and then you were 211 pounds, which is pretty substantial. But then, secondarily, something that you're very good at is not only acknowledging the good in other people, but also finding unique ways of helping the people that you help through the ways that you post content, which kind of stood out to me. And we connected at the Real Coaches Summit, which is an event that I think everybody should go to. And if they don't go to that one, just go to something so that a person just needs to connect, a person needs to step out of their comfort zone. But not only are we going to talk about your weight loss journey, but we are going to talk about some of the people who have kind of impacted you along the way. One of those being our mutual friend, Jeb Stuart Johnston. And when you kind of told him like his impact on you, that kind of like stopped me in my tracks because I was like, wow, like our industry needs more moments like that because the people with lots of experience need to hear those things. And the people who are saying those need to get better at saying those more often. And that goes for all of us.
Hmm.
Like all of us, no matter where we're at in our journey, we need to vocalize when somebody has a positive impact on us because it keeps us all healthy and in the industry. That said,
Hmm.
gonna pass the mic over to you. Tell me about that kind of moment where you got to connect with Jeb.
Yeah, so a big part of my whole story is that I had some difficulties with alcohol. It was a big driver in my weight gain and also, made it easier to overeat. I mean, it just was affecting everything in negative ways. And so that was a big focus early on once I had decided to take the steps to, transform my life. But the alcohol part was difficult. It was really difficult because I was drinking, every day for 4 or 5 years at that point, a significant amount. So it wasn't just like I can drop this and I had the physical dependency, and so it was just like a really scary kind of lonely feeling of just like I don't know if I can do this. It felt that way physically, like if I don't have alcohol, like my body is. And so that caused a lot of anxiety and just a lot of stress. And I was able to get my drinking down in the early stages to like 3 to 4 days per week. But when I was still drinking, I was overindulging, just having way too much, making regrettable decisions, and so on and so forth. And so I was just feeling very lost and honestly scared and unsure if I could even overcome the issue. And so I had been following Jeb for a few months at that point, and this is back in about this was in 2022, 2023. I can't remember the exact year, but I'd been following him for a little while, and his stuff really resonated with me because, he talks about a lot of the emotional stuff and things like that. And he had mentioned that he had struggled with alcohol just once in the past in a previous post. It was from a post I had seen, several weeks prior to messaging him, but I just had like this moment where I was like, I need to ask somebody for help. And I remembered that he had shared about his struggles and I felt connected to him, even though we had never talked before. Like everything he said was resonating with me. And I was just like, this guy, like, we're on the same wavelength kind of deal. And so I was like, he's into music, all that stuff. I'm into music. Everything was just like, I was like, this is the guy I'm gonna ask, you know. So I just reached out to him and I was like, hey, like, I really don't know what if I can do this and I was using language like conquer. I don't know if I can conquer this. And he just listened to me and asked the right questions. And it was such a breakthrough moment. I remember the moment after having that short conversation over Instagram, just being like, wow, I've never thought of this in this way before. And so it was just a huge change. And so it was having someone who just listened because, he thoughtfully replied. And in a moment where you feel very alone, going through a struggle like that, just having someone listen was huge. But then he also just asked the right questions that really got me thinking about, oh, this isn't necessarily something I need to conquer. It's something that I've been using and has had benefit in my life. And so it really just kind of, he taught me in that short conversation to stop feeling so guilty about it and stop trying to conquer it and just like accept it for what it was and move forward instead of like trying to punish myself or feel so guilty and filled with shame. And so it made a huge impact on me. And then yeah, it was really cool to be able to meet him at the Real Coaches Summit. And I had been wanting to reach out to him for some time because it really was. It helped me right then and there. Like I felt the shift. Obviously things didn't, change. I didn't stop drinking right then and there. But, over time, I really looked back to that conversation was like that was the mover. That was what triggered my feeling of I can actually stop drinking, get a handle on my drinking. But I'm a little shy and I didn't want to bother him and reach out and I knew he probably didn't remember the conversation, and so I was just like, oh well, I'll meet him at the Real Coaches Summit. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go to the Real Coaches Summit was because he was a speaker. And so it was really, really cool to tell him that. And I'm so glad that I did because his response also was also incredible, just like how much of an impact it had on him. And so, that was another realization of like when people do help us out, like you got to let them know because they don't even know. And you know,
Yeah.
so yeah. Anyways, I hope I covered that well. If you have any more questions, obviously you're free to ask.
Yeah, no, you said that really well. You were really eloquent about that, and you pointed out all the things that I thought were important. And I'm just going to add some more context because like that it is not easy to pop onto a podcast and share like that. And I like to make it so that people feel like it's not just them. So for me, a lot of my life before going into the fitness industry was feeling like I was strongly attached to this 9 to 5 vision of like you go, you do what the boss tells you to do, you clock out, you go home, and then you deal with the empty feelings that you had from all the work
Mm,
that you did that day. And I had no idea what kind of an impact a person's like environment and surrounding and community can have on them. And like they talk about like your 5 closest contacts, your 5 closest friends, things like that. And I'll preface this to say that like everybody can have a lot of different friends, but everybody is probably going to be majorly influenced by the people who have the biggest influence on them. And then for me, it was just that, like, out of all the people that I was surrounded by when I was working that job, all of them coped with stress with either like smoking or alcohol. And I made a vow to myself that no matter what the context was, I would never be a smoker because I am aware through people close to me how hard it is to quit. But I would go drinking with coworkers because it was like the only things that we really had in common. Like we liked hockey and we liked beer. And I
mm,
found that I made more friends when I would drink beer. But then as I got older and looked back after I kind of like I was like, okay, like drinking alcohol has never served me. But what was more clear to me was looking back, the people who felt closest to me when I was drinking were just kind of happier with like a watered down version of me, like a less
mm,
ambitious, more settled down, less articulate version of me. And it did make some people uncomfortable when I just like, boom, cutting out booze. So, one of the things that stood out to me when it came to how much of an impact your lifestyle and your environment can have on you is how important it was to have like a sense of purpose in what you did and how impactful one connection was and how that can kind of ripple out and compound from there.
Mm,
And sometimes I'll look back and I'll think I could do a better job of that. But one of my focuses in my career has always been when somebody helps me, let them know. And when I got
mm,
to see you doing that, like right in front of me, I was like, this is great. This is like my people right here. Like he has been impacted. He's letting them know. This is exactly what I've been doing for years. And it was like, I could feel it in my heart how much he had an impact on you. And I could feel it in my heart how much Jeb had no idea and how
mm,
much you both positively impacted each other's careers for better. And I was just like, this is awesome. And then the best way for me to help others is to kind of like showcase this story because there's probably, I'm sure there's people who listen to my podcast who've never spoken to me, who maybe like they're like, I don't know about that Chris guy, but I listen to his podcast. Or maybe they're taking lessons from it and they're like, I'm doing this because this other guy is doing this. Or maybe hopefully
mm,
they're hearing your story and they're thinking like, wow, that is tough and like that does like keep me up at night kind of thing, these battles that we face and those life things and just the whole part where like we think that life is we start here and then we go up and there's no ups and downs. We just think everybody
mm,
has it perfect because we see somebody presenting on a stage and we think, wow, like it must have been great that they actually made it and they got it up there. And we don't think about the times when they thought that they would have failed or they thought they were going to quit or maybe they
mm,
had a really dark day. And I think everybody experiences that. Some people speak about it, some people don't. And for everybody, their battle is going to be their biggest battle. So, regardless of somebody else's battle, that individual's battle is their biggest battle.
right.
And so, for us to just kind of make a space to talk about that stuff, I think is super important. But not only that, but you have accomplished so much in your own fitness journey. And there's a lot of people out there that I think have it in their head that's impossible to do such a thing. And I think it's important to hear from you what your experience was like, hear about what was like the turning point. Because, like, recently, one of my online clients, he asked me, he was like, what was the turning point in your fitness journey? And I was like, well, I was always athletic to some degree, but it was like when I was doing the warehouse thing and I was seeing myself slide, and then my girlfriend at that time decided the relationship could come to an end, and it
Mm,
wasn't relating how I looked. It might have been my attitude, and it might have been just stuff that she was going through.
mm,
Nothing but respect for that whole situation. I think it was like a necessary thing for me to kind of like look in the mirror and make a decision independently, where it was like
mm,
regardless of what was happening relationship wise, that was a move that I needed to make nonetheless. Um,
mm.
but then I'm going to turn around and flip it to you. So, in your fitness journey, Steve, what was a moment where you're like, okay, like there's no turning back. We just have to go forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because alcohol was such a driver of what got me off track and out of shape and gained all the weight in the first place. But what's funny is I reached out to someone on Instagram when I was drinking. And it gave me the courage to reach out to because it's hard to reach out, and that's something that I understand from other people's perspectives. As a coach now myself, it can be very, very hard to ask for help. So I did it late at night. I can't even remember what it was. It was just like I'm done. Like because I had recently moved back from South Korea and I had been living in South Korea for 4 years, which is where the majority of the weight gain happened. It had started a little bit before I moved to Korea, and then it really, really went up, and the drinking got worse and worse, and then COVID happened and all that. And so I came home in late 2021, so back to the States, and was just kind of doing my own thing, like hadn't decided that I was going to lose weight yet, or get back in shape in general, but it was kind of on my mind. And I think it was just kind of, I got fed up with being hungover all the time. And it also got to the point where like I wasn't carrying myself very well at all because I'm a pretty big guy in general too. So like I kind of use that to justify gaining weight. Like it's like, oh, I'm still carrying myself pretty well. I can still do stuff. And so once it kind of was getting to the point where it's like I like can't do stuff. I remember yeah, in December of 2021, I went on a road trip and I was visiting my buddy in St. Louis, who I met in Korea. And I was putting on my socks and like it took me like 5 or 6 minutes to put on my sock. And I was like sweating and just like, that was a normal occurrence for me, but like someone else was there and I'm like, God, we were like going somewhere and I'm like struggling to even put on my socks. So that was a big eye-opening moment where it's like, okay, I'm getting to the point where I can't do stuff, day-to-day normal stuff like I used to be able to. And so that was a big moment too. So yeah, just once it got to the point where I really felt like it was holding me back, like it felt like a point of no return almost. It was like if I let this continue going, it's going to be too hard to get back from. So I took a shot and reached out to a buddy who I had known for a while, and he was a personal trainer, and I was just like, man, I need help. And right away he was just like, I got you. Like, let's go. And so he was a big help for me as well. I have a post about him on my Instagram as well. His name's Cameron. Anyways, so yeah, it wasn't like a one moment necessarily, but it was already on my mind like, I don't want to be like this. I certainly don't want to keep going. Like, I need to stop this at the very least. But then there were these little things like struggling to put my socks on, running, feeling winded after jogging for like 5 seconds across the street. I'm like, these are not normal things that I'm used to. Like, this is too far. And so right then, I just met after that message, the rest is history. And then
Yeah.
soon after that, I reached out to Jeb and got help with the drinking aspect too. And yeah.
No, that's good. Like that, everything that you're saying calls out a lot of things that are minor details that I notice because I've either experienced them myself or because I've witnessed somebody else do them. The first thing is like you talked about how you had a little bit of liquid courage to reach out.
Hmm.
I think that's more common than many people will admit. Like I can
Hmm.
admit there have been some times, especially during the pandemic, where I was like, man, this sucks. And I'd have a couple beer and I was a little bit buzzed. And all of a sudden, like I sent a few messages and it's generally along the lines of like, wow, thank you so much. You've had such a positive impact on me. But then I
Hmm.
started to notice I was like the recipient of a lot of these messages too. And then as like
Hmm.
time went on during this long period of isolation, people started to come out of the woodwork and they're like, "Hey, I'm cutting drinking. It has too much of an effect on me." Like I had friends who had gone cold turkey on like maybe drugs and then they relapsed. Like the pandemic was not easy. And
No.
like the problem is that people forget about like the times when they really struggled and they remember the times that went well. And then a
Hmm.
person in the depths of their struggle is looking at that person, they're like, oh man, they just crushed it. Like they never struggled. And then some like the theme of this podcast often comes up is bringing up the things that help people with their resilience and help people to like
Hmm.
stay with the journey or to kind of defy what may be seemingly impossible because due to ego, due to all these other factors, a lot of people don't see the point in like kind of sharing
Hmm.
those vulnerable aspects.
Hmm.
And even just in kind of outlining like it was multiple moments because like I can relate. Like there's been lots of throughout my training career, there's been moments where I'm like, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good, and then I get thrown like a character building moment as I call them. And it
Hmm.
just like shifts what I thought was good. Like whether it's like a gym closing or like just feeling like taken for granted or maybe just something changing. There's all these shifts and changes to life. Like we experience so many things in life, and then how do we bounce back? And we
Hmm.
bounce back by developing resilience. And how do we learn to be resilient? Well, we have to learn from others. And it helps us to kind of grit our teeth and like get through it when we know that we're not alone.
Hmm.
And I have no doubt there's a lot of people in this industry still that feel alone, where they're like, it's only me kind of in the depths of this struggle. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding in the fact that, like, when you reached out to each person that you reached out to, you felt less alone. And
Hmm.
I can share the same sentiment. There's lots of people who have shouted out like dozens and dozens of times on my show. And the reason I give them shout outs is because they made me feel not alone. And I've gotten on planes and I've paid thousands of dollars to meet these people, even if maybe they said a few words. I was like, I went all this way to meet you because there was a time that you made me feel no longer alone. And as such, when we know the power of these things, then it equips us to kind of be people in the industry where somebody hears us talk about this stuff and like we get the message, we answer it. Like I've probably been the reason why like 20 people have quit their jobs, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I always like if they ask questions about how to get through everything, I give them the
Hmm.
answers. I tell them exactly what I did. Like you pick up a job at the bar, go do a side hustle for a bit, do whatever you got to do. It's not going to look pretty, but as long as you don't quit and as long as you keep putting in effort and keep learning from people, you'll probably be fine. It's not going to be glamorous. It's never glamorous. But if you want to
Yeah.
be in this space, or if you want to do something that gives you purpose, if you want to take care of yourself, I'm going to be the last person to talk you out of it and probably the first person to talk you into it because of
Hmm.
how much of an impact it can have. That said, you talked about your time in Korea. That piqued my interest.
Hmm.
I'm curious, what got you there in the first place, and what brought you back?
Yeah, so I graduated from college at age 24 in 2017, and I had been interested in traveling in general since high school, especially, to like Asia, Korea. I grew up around a lot of Korean American friends, so I was exposed to it and stuff like that. And so I was just familiar, and I was like, that seems really cool. But I put it on the back burner for a while because it was kind of a dream in high school. Like I would love to do that someday. And then, fast forward 6 years, I'm graduating college. I and it just felt like, hey, if I'm gonna do it, now would be a good time. And so I did it. And I planned to go for 1 year, but I enjoyed living there so much that I was like, well, I'll stay another year. And then it was 2020, and then it just was like, well, I can either stay here during COVID or go back to the States during COVID. And I just chose to stay there, and I ended up staying an additional almost 2 more years. So it rounded out to just about 4 years. But yeah, it was just having an interest in wanting to travel and just having some exposure to the culture and yeah, wanting that experience and feeling like I needed to do it before it was too late.
Absolutely. And then what was kind of the moment where you finally came back home?
Yeah, so I mean, I really, really enjoyed my first 2 years there before COVID happened. But once COVID happened, I just fell into a dark place, especially with the drinking, because it was like the isolation just got so immense. Even though I was still working, it was like, but now I'm not going out after work with friends. Now I'm not going out on the weekends, like, and getting that kind of release. And so it just became like this. I would just go into my cave in my apartment and like drink, and it was a complete mess. Like it just felt terrible all the time. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was like, I need to get out of here. I knew I needed to change my environment if I wanted to change how my life was going. Because I still enjoyed being in Korea, but it's like I can't be here like this, right? Like this, I can't keep living like this. And it's like, yeah. And so I was just ready at that point too, because, teaching during COVID, because I was an English teacher and teaching during COVID was crazy. I had to do Zoom classes like this with classes of kindergartners with all their moms in the background, which is really stressful. Like they're all watching. You got all these Korean moms watching you, judging your every move. And I'm just like, so it was really stressful too. Like the work got almost easier, but like way more stressful at the same time. And so there was heightened stress, less reduced, social interaction in general, and just a longing for home at the end of the day too. Because I had only planned to go for a year or two. So COVID extended my stay, and so I was just like, it's time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense because, like, I liked what you said about kind of recognizing the environment and realizing that something drastic needed to happen and it needed to happen now
Hmm.
because it's multifaceted. That's how I felt when I left the warehouse job. And when I say that, this isn't disrespect to the warehouse job, it's more so a self-awareness realization to help people identify for themselves if there's like a self-awareness realization that they have. Because the reason that people don't make a change is usually because it's not that bad. Like they could probably
Hmm.
stay, they could probably ride it out longer. And
Hmm.
2 years turns into 5 years, turns into 10 years, turns into 20 years and it directly correlates to your health and it directly
Hmm.
correlates to how you treat the people around you. And it is usually highly correlated with substance abuse because if
Hmm.
people don't feel the right sense of purpose in the work that they do, they have to numb it down and they're most likely not going to make decisions that are in their best interest if we look at it like objectively. Because a lot of the
Hmm.
times people will be like, what do you mean that's not in my best interest? I'm happy. I'm like, it's not in your best interest from a health perspective. Like, you are not functioning properly. You are not
Hmm.
strong. You are not active. You are not confident. And it
Hmm.
can hurt somebody's feelings to point it out that way. But if, like, us as coaches can't at least have the capability to provide that level of support, nobody else will. Because the
Right.
people selling them the things that they're consuming, they're not going to say it and the
Hmm.
people benefiting from their like mind numbed laborious efforts day in day out always show up same thing 9 to 5 9 to 5 9 to 5 like they're not going to complain they got somebody
Hmm.
who's never going to go anywhere and so by addressing it in that way my hope that it can maybe give somebody an aha moment before life like really gives them an aha moment because a lot of the time the aha moment is a health scare or it's like
Hmm.
significant loss or it's somebody doing something that they can't undo. It's like
Hmm.
something getting to the point where it's bubbled up to something so big that they can never reverse what they've done. Like
Right.
people can leave a job, get a different job and go back to the old job. They can do that. People think you can't, but like unless you're an absolute terrible employee, you probably could always go back. And if you
Hmm.
can't, there's probably a duplicate of that workplace somewhere else, parallel universe. Find the job again, start again. But it's just that that is such an important component because like I know for myself, if I took the people who are amazing people but struggled the most with their health and wellness and I just gave them a different job that paid the same but was better environment, they probably have an easier time with their health journey.
Hmm.
And sometimes we kind of overlook that. We're like, oh, it must be your hormones, or it must be like we come up with all these reasons what it must be. But
Hmm.
honestly, it's probably the environment. And I
Right.
can't go in there and work with them, but I could probably pluck them out of there and put them somewhere else that's more conducive. And for some people, it might be that they're around too many people and they need to do work independently so that they can kind of stay on their path. And for other
Hmm.
people, it's like they're not around people and they need to be around people. Like what you spoke to with the isolation during the pandemic, like you were in a different country. I could see how isolation would like escalate very quickly there. For me, I was in the same condominium that I lived in for years, but I had already kind of like walked my own path, spent a lot of time solo, always working, always grinding. And then the pandemic
Hmm.
came and it was like almost what was already a problem became an amplified problem because when everybody was like, okay, you can only see your close contacts, I'm like, I don't have close contacts. Like, I can
Right.
drive 45 minutes to see my parents, but other than
Hmm.
that, like, that's it. And so I did drive 45 minutes to see my parents as often as I could. But if that's once a week, then you're still in complete silence and solitude for the other 5 days a week, 6 days a week kind of thing. And so it happens very easily. And there's probably a lot of people that isolation happens to that you wouldn't even think about. Because I was still pumping
Mm-hmm.
out podcasts, I was still training people, I was still coaching people, but that isolation had an impact on me. And that's where, like, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, like that helped because it wove in one community aspect that didn't feel high friction. You just show up, somebody is going to kick your butt, they'll probably teach you a few things. You get connection. It's like forced connection.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to tell good jokes. You just have to be alive and show up.
Yeah.
And just that little minimum requirement was very, very helpful for me. And like another shift that I made to kind of speak to the merit and value of somebody getting themselves into a different environment, because it doesn't always have to be dramatic. But like
Mm-hmm.
when I shifted from exclusively remote work to doing a short contract with Lululemon in one of the stores, I started being around people and I was like, whoa, like at first I was awkward because it was like
Mm-hmm.
I had spent so much time solo during the previous like couple of years. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden I'm working around people. And then I was like, oh man, this is good for my soul, good for my heart. Just like I just felt part of something bigger than myself again.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized just like how important that is. And then since all of that, for myself personally, I've found ways to like embed community in all facets of my life. So I know I can go to jujitsu during weekdays. I'm part of an entrepreneur group where we'll either meet among ourselves in small groups going for walks, or we'll meet for like seminars where we're learning about budgeting, financing, or we'll do like food bank drives. And then I kind of have a ritual where like on weekends I'll visit my parents, maybe visit one of my siblings, and I've just made this like a norm. And I make sure that there's a point where even if I still have more work to do, I just stop the work and I go and I do a visit because I realize how beneficial it is. But then with that said, like I've helped a lot of people with fitness where they're still lacking that thing. Like I might be their strongest connection that they have. And I'm sure you've
Mm-hmm.
experienced this with people that you've helped too. So
Yeah.
what is something that you've learned regarding like maintaining connections in your own life? What's something you're working on or something that you've learned?
On maintaining connections. That's a great question. And I agree with everything you just said. And I actually just recently moved just a couple months ago. And so I'm in a new place where I don't have I don't know many people really. And so I'm actually kind of feeling a little bit of that loneliness. So this is a great time for this conversation because I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I need to get out there and like meet people here.
Yeah.
So as far as like maintaining connections, I like to just reach out to people every once in a while and just, I mean, because I care about people and I want to maintain these relationships. And sometimes you do have to put in effort because they can wither away. Even really, really close friends that you think are just like, this is not going to change ever. Like, if long enough time goes, like, it just kind of naturally happens. And so trying to just even sending just a quick hey what's up kind of message like that and see how people are doing just and trying to take a general interest in how their lives are going instead of just you know using it as a way to like express how I'm feeling and all this stuff. It's like genuine curiosity about how they're doing, but I definitely could be better. I think we all could be better with
Yeah.
with stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm that's something that I'm working on for sure because I'm in a new place and I'm in a transitioning period right now, and so I'm kind of figuring out the best ways to do that as I go.
Yeah, I mean, I have utmost respect for the way that you answered that question because what happens a lot when I'll interview people is they will think about the question, they'll be like, what are they going to think if I just say
Mm,
exactly where I'm at? And then they'll be like, oh, I am the most connected person ever. And like when nobody is 100% all the time. And I'm going
mhm,
to draw from some personal experiences because that's the easiest way that I can interview people is I give a little, they give a little, I give a little, they give a little. So
mhm,
when I first moved to Edmonton, I grew up in the country. I was a country bumpkin and I was kind of like doing my own thing then too. I had a couple kind of close friends that I grew up with, but then we kind of all parted ways. And then I moved to the city to kind of go to school. I worked at Sport Check for a bit. I made some friends at the store I was working at, and then I moved on from the store and I was working at the warehouse, and I kind of made some friends through there, but I kind of felt like I needed to kind of diversify even more. Kind of did similar things to you where it'd be like, okay, well, I'll just kind of message the people who are in my world already. And what I found was it was like I would do all the right things, but nothing came of it. It was really
Mm,
frustrating. It kind of dragged me down, and it made me more sad than it was when I started reaching out. And so
mm,
then I realized I needed to do things that I had never done before in order to get a different outcome. And it sounds super cliche because we talk about this in all kinds of different contexts. The things that I did was I kept signing up for just the most random things ever and like not feeling 100% sure about going and doing them, but doing them anyways.
mm,
And I've done this in all different categories of my life. So I'm going to list out a few of them. When it was just a matter of like meeting friends, there's like this social club that is organized around like different sports and leagues and stuff. So I signed up for dodgeball, kickball, soccer, and what else? I think that was most of it during that round. And soccer, I made no friends. Kickball, I actually almost made some people angry because
mm.
I thought kickball would be the most like casually easygoing sport of everything in that league. No, super intense, super like hardcore people. Like it
Yeah.
was they were I'm not gonna say they weren't athletic, but they were a special kind of athletic that excelled at kickball. That's how I'll say it. And
Gotcha.
it
I
was
think I know
just
what you
like
mean.
if I did something that made me seem like it was my first day at kickball, they had no empathy for me. It was like, "What are you doing?" I'm
Mm.
like, "Dude, like I know that kickball is your world, but there's more to it and I just messed up one time. Chill."
Right.
And it got to the point where I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna stop showing up. I'll just get a sub to show up." And then like because of that, like how dare he stop showing up?
Mm,
Then dodgeball, I made some friends through that, and we actually like the connection there resulted in a few trips. We went to Vegas, we went to music festival, I did a bike trip from Banff and Canmore and back. I did lots of things with these people that I met. And then that kind of like we kind of outgrew each other.
hmm.
And but then as things unfolded in the years to follow, I joined soccer leagues, indoor and outdoor. I joined basketball. I recently did my first pickleball game as like a sub for a pickleball team. And I realized
Mm,
like I can just do all these random things and nothing bad happens and nobody explodes and nobody dies. And
right.
the thing that kind of gave me the most like comfort in stepping into these domains was knowing that like I didn't have to be scared for what would happen because sometimes nothing happens. And then you
Hmm.
just move on. Like the number of times I've gone to things for the very first time and nothing happened, that's okay. Nothing bad happened. And like
Hmm.
maybe sometimes like something real weird and awkward happened, but like you didn't have to go back then. Like if you don't like it, you don't have to
Hmm.
go back. And then this
Yeah.
transposed into even just like my quests in dating and trying to meet people and stuff. Like I have gone to so many different like mixing and mingling events and mixing and matching events, just all this different speed dating, this and that and the other thing.
Mhm.
And nothing bad ever happened. I didn't explode. I didn't die. Nobody embarrassed me in a way that could never be like fixed or anything like that.
Right.
And it was just that like what ends up happening, like I would say if we surveyed a lot of people, there's probably plenty of people who are more brave than I am to do these things. And then there's the other percentage of people who are making up the reasons why, of all people to do this, they can't. And what I
Mm,
usually point out is like, I'm a bigger chicken than most people, and I did it. And
hmm.
so, like, why would somebody else think that they can't based on the fact that I did it? Like, they should be thinking that they can based on the fact that I did it. Because usually,
Right.
if I win something, suddenly everybody thinks that they can do it because I won it. So if I could win, and so I'd
Yeah.
like them to take the same path. Like, if I did something that I had no clue what I was doing or I had no idea what would happen, that should be the reason why they should do it.
Hmm.
And then one last thing before I turn the table over to you, but I will say that somebody who I think we both know, Alex McBarity, did you get to meet him at the Real Coaches Summit?
We didn't meet in person, but we connected on Instagram afterwards.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'll tell you a little bit about him. him and I connected at, it was called the Kansas City Fitness Summit back in 2019.
Mm,
And that's actually when I first met Jeb myself. And
mm,
Jeb actually held space for me where it was like Jeb and I had mutual friends already. So he was aware that I was also from Edmonton and like I was friends with his friends. So he sat down and talked to me, but he out of all the people, he had the most like presence when we were
mm,
talking where I knew that like everything else could be chaotic and loud and noisy and he was listening to me and that made me feel special. So that's where like
mm.
when he listened to you and he listened to me, I was like, I know how that feels. He listened to me one time too.
Right, right.
But with that said, I ran into Alex McBrarty and him and I didn't talk too much at the event, but then after we connected and we do Zoom calls where we kind of catch up and compare notes. And then as time went on, I think 2020 or 2021, I started doing some contracting for him as one of his coaches on his team and doing some consulting within his business.
Hmm.
But the reason I bring him up is he's actually developing a book, and I think it's something along the lines of like making friendships.
Mm,
And the thing is that like he actually spent a lot of his life living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then he uprooted and moved over to New Jersey. And
mm,
so he had like a very established social circle and he knew somebody in every pocket of the community and a lot of his clients were based around there and then he had to go
mm,
start fresh. That came with a little bit of discomfort because it kind of helped him realize like how focused he had been on his work, how career
mm,
focused he was. And then he kind of did a 360 where he created more balance in his life than ever before. And
mm,
in a lot of cases, it's easy to fall back to the old habits where it's like, well, if there's nobody to hang out with, then I'll just work because I've done that lots.
mm, mm,
But what he did was he consistently put himself out of his comfort zone. He go to like different like dancing meetups because he has an interest in it's like salsa dancing and I think some ballroom dancing and he even does some hip hop dancing sometimes.
Oh, nice.
So he's constantly putting himself outside of his comfort zone. Like that wasn't necessarily like the things that he gravitated towards naturally at first, but he kind of evolved into this person that was confident doing all these different things.
Mm,
And so for people who are kind of curious about what he'd be writing about, I highly recommend giving him a follow. You can find him at A Team Fitness. If you listen to the show, I think he was like 2 episodes ago. So he's a familiar face on this show. But just on the topic of making friends, I think that was a really good shout out to have because I think he's someone that, for me, being his friend, he's taught me a lot. And I can imagine the connection that you'll have with him down the road as you continue to connect on social media will be really fruitful. But that
yeah, I'm sure.
said, to give you a chance to talk again, what is something from the last 3 years that you did all by yourself that you're particularly proud of that we haven't talked about yet?
What is something I've done in the last 3 years that I did by myself?
Yep.
Like, can you give me an example of something you've done in the
Yeah.
last 3 years?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I give people tough questions, but it kind of gets people thinking. So,
Yeah.
if it was me and I was giving you an example of something from the past 3 years that I did all by myself that I was really proud of, I think, honestly, I'm just going to go with the easy one. The easy one for me is I'm the one who got out of bed and went to my first jiu-jitsu class. Nobody like
Mm,
pulled me out of bed and held my hand and brought me there. Now, the context being I had a lot of people encouraging me, but I've
hmm.
had people encouraging me to do all kinds of things in my life. And I think that's
Right,
something that we forget. Sometimes
right.
sometimes we're so quick to give credit to other people for the things that are really big in our lives. And this will speak to everything that you've done to this point. Like
Hmm.
we started this off, we gave credit to our friends, we gave credit to the people who inspired us, but you're the one who made this massive change in your life. And that's substantial, but we already talked about that, so you don't get to use
Right,
that.
right,
But
right, right.
along those lines, you can pick something that's simple. It doesn't have to be extravagant, but this is your opportunity to acknowledge to yourself that you're the one who did that.
Right. Yeah, so I would, it's hard to choose because I have had help with so many things. But I would say choosing to I'm proud of making the choice to become a coach because I was on track to become a full-time teacher. I had been a teacher in some capacity for 7 years. For the past 7 years, I actually just recently stopped teaching. So, and it was a scary thing. I mean, I there were people, saying like, "Are you sure?" Especially some family members close, that are just like, they believe you can do it, but it's like, is it even possible to do kind of thing? So it's like, I think you should stick with teaching. And so I'm proud of like not letting that hold me down and just be like, nope, I'm gonna believe, just choosing to believe in myself and believe that I could do it in the face of like it's gonna be really, really hard and like, people saying I don't know if this is even possible to do to make a career because I mean online coaching in general, especially online, these are online coaching is a newer concept. So like if older generations are just like, what in the world is that even something you can do? So like, you know, it's so I'm proud of myself for doing that because it has been working out. It's not to say it hasn't been a struggle, but because it absolutely has, to go back to what you were saying earlier about life is not like this. Like it's ups and downs. And even though like my life is, I like my life a lot. There's definitely downs, right? And ups, there's hardship and but it's like I'm willing to face that those struggles and hardships because I made that choice, right? Whereas like I knew that if I continued or well, I liked teaching, but I have a degree in business management and leadership because I kind of like didn't know what I wanted to do and was like, I kind of just resigned to like, well, I guess I'll just become a middle manager in some corporate job eventually. Like that'll be fine. But I'm more of like a creative person. Like music is my first passion, even before fitness, and stuff like that. And so I was just like, I can't I can't put up with the struggle for something I don't like. You know what I mean? Like I can do the work, but like I'll be miserable. So I was like, I need to do something where, yeah, it's going to be a lot of hard work, but I have a purpose and I know that I'm making a difference and I know that helping people because that is a big part of just my entire philosophy is helping people is I think is majorly important, which, obviously we've talked about. And I think that because of the experiences I've had in the past where I have helped people, and it's like that's when I feel the best, when I'm making an impact on other people. So I'm proud that I was able to take the plunge and go for what I wanted versus, kind of coasting because what I've done for most of my life was coast. I mean, I coasted through school for the most part. I coasted through a lot of stuff and because I could get away with it. But I think that coasting had a negative impact on my self-esteem and my self-worth as well because there's always this thought of like you can do more than this, like you are capable of doing more, you like so yeah I'm but it would have been very easy to just be like, "Hey, I'm gonna go and get this 9 to 5 and get a stable job and all that," but I couldn't do it, so I'm proud of myself for doing it, doing
That's
this
amazing.
instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, never stop being proud of yourself because that's something like I've realized time can pass and we're being critical of ourselves and we never like stop to realize like what we've actually done. We if you don't realize what you've done at the moment that you need to, it gets way easy to quit. But when you realize what
Hmm.
you've done at the time that you need to, it could be the reason
Hmm.
that you keep going. Like when you're at like the lowest point, it can be the reason like you have proof of concept. You know what you have to do. You've done it before. Do it again. And
Hmm.
like from our conversation today, which I think is well worth listening, so I hope people tune into this one. But from the conversation, the things that I noticed, the industry is changing, but the traits and characteristics that you have will serve you and help many other people. It's because you've got this life experience that makes you stand out. It makes me excited because like people can forecast so much bad news on all these different things and it can only add to our stress.
Hmm.
But people who actually like bring a positive energy to a room are going to be valuable no matter what room you place them in, whether it's a virtual one, an in-person one, et cetera, et cetera. And then your ability to be creative and stand out in the ways that you have to this point and the ways that you'll continue to do so are going to set you apart. So it's just like without getting too yappy, like so much of what you spoke to there resonates with me. I'm sure it resonates with many other
Mm.
coaches. But that said, like I could probably talk at you for like 2 hours, but I just want to say thank you so much for making my show your first show. And thank you so much for making time for me today, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's my pleasure, and I hope that I shared some stuff of value. Once I start going, I'll forget what I would even said. So hopefully there's some snippets in there that people can pull some value from it. No, I know there is. But yeah, man, I mean, and it's a pleasure to come on because I really connect with your stuff too. It really resonates with me because you're just open and honest about stuff. And I like to be open and honest about stuff and just yeah, acknowledge that life is not always easy. That's a big one because I know that that's true for me. So like if life is like this, but then people are advertising life being like this, like it makes you feel bad when your life is like this, but like most people's lives are like this. Like no one's is actually like that. So like when you can actually connect and be like, okay, like yes, other people, even people who are like very successful are still have struggles. And so yeah, so your content really inspires me as well, and there's a reason why I go and like it, and just like if I miss it, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
because yeah, it's raw, it's relatable, and it resonates, and I think that that's important, and that's what I try to do too. It can be very hard sometimes, you know, being so vulnerable about certain things. But I just know it's worth it because of the impact that it can have. And it was kind of like you were saying, like nothing bad has happened. Like I've shared stuff about myself that, you know, I never would have in the past, or, you know, or just never would have opened up in general in the past. And it's like nothing bad has happened. In fact, only good things have come from it. You know, I've been able to help people. And so it's, yeah. Anyways, I forgot where I started with that. Love your stuff too. That's what I started. So yeah, I appreciate the stuff you make. And yeah.
Sweet. I'm going to stop the recording.